Hi, I'm Davy, and I'm awesome, and welcome to Davy Reviews Wrestling, where I review wrestling-related things all from the perspective of a fan, not an insider. So this week, I'm going to be reviewing a wrestling documentary that I honestly never thought would even get made, let alone be something I'd want to review. But it's a documentary that right now you can find on Hulu called You Cannot Kill David Arquette. It is a relatively new documentary. It was made in 2020 about David Arquette making his way back into the wrestling world. Now, I had heard about that in like 2019, that David Arquette was getting back into the wrestling world on the independents, and I remember at the time I just kind of went, okay, whatever, hope he's having fun. But this documentary shed some light on how much of a struggle it was for him to, in fact, get back into the independents. Because, as most of us know, the wrestling fans were not happy with David Arquette. And this documentary does talk about that. It talks about all the backlash he got for being a former WCW World Heavyweight Champion. And I've said this in a former video, and I'll say it again, I don't understand why he got so much of that backlash. I never did. I was never angry at David Arquette for being a former WCW champion. I was angry at the people who allowed him to be a WCW champion. The people who said, hey, just to promote our movie, why don't we put David Arquette in here and have him win the title? Now, I would have understood them bringing in David Arquette to be a part of the show, but to give him the title was such a bad idea. It also irritates me to this day how Vince Russo loves to defend that move by saying, look, we were in the papers the next day. I hate to break it to you, but not all publicity is good publicity. It was bad publicity. It wasn't what killed WCW. There were a lot of things that killed WCW, but it was one of the nails in the coffin. Like, for me personally, it wasn't David Arquette. It was the fact that they would take a title that they were telling me was prestigious and put it on an actor who was untrained and definitely didn't look like he could hold his own against these guys, basically calling me an idiot for believing in this title at any point. And that really was the point I stopped watching WCW regularly. The best they would get out of me at that point was occasionally I would tune in a little bit to see something, but not for an entire episode. Like, I tuned in here and there when I found out Booker T had won the title and I wanted to see that, but I just couldn't care about WCW anymore. But again, I gotta stress, I never laid that blame on David Arquette. David Arquette was a fan, a lifelong fan, who was told, hey, we want to put the strap on you. To find out that his initial reaction was, no, you guys don't put the belt on me, that's not a good idea, people are going to get mad about it, and that they had to talk him into it, makes me respect him even more. Because most of the wrestling fans out there that love to criticize David Arquette for being a champion, basically villainizing him for allowing them to put the title on him, if Eric Bischoff or Vince Russo at the time would have asked you to paint their fence, you wouldn't have said no. But now that that's out of the way, let's get to the documentary. The documentary starts off with that, how villainized he was for having been a former WCW champion, and the depression it put on him. Now, I will say this, in the documentary, they kind of put the blame on the movie Ready to Rumble and him doing that stuff with WCW, that he got typecasted as the goof character in Hollywood. And I gotta say, that's not fair. You were kind of already typecasted as that. That was more like your character in Scream and some of the other weird characters you were doing. Like, I know it didn't do very well, but your character in Buffy the Vampire Slayer and so on and so forth. And I think that was just, he played a goof so well that he got typecasted as it. Not to say he couldn't do some serious roles. He did some serious roles that were really good, but we just had more fun watching you be a goof. But I definitely wouldn't say being a WCW World Champion helped his acting career. It started out with him and his depression about that, how, you know, he felt like he insulted the wrestling world, and he didn't like the backlash of people saying he insulted the wrestling world, especially because he loves wrestling and he respects wrestling so much, which I think every fan could understand. Because as a fan, it's one reason I'm very big on mentioning that I'm not an insider, because I want people to understand these are just my opinions as a wrestling fan, not somebody who claims to have any insight into the inner workings, because I don't ever want to insult wrestling and I don't ever want to bring anything bad on wrestling. I love wrestling. It may sound weird to non-wrestling fans, but wrestling is one of those things that's always been there for me. It even went into him going to a Legends of Wrestling event and wanting to be on the card, not necessarily to wrestle, but just be on the card, and being told absolutely no, to the point of things getting heated and him getting into a fight with, I don't know if Brian Knobbs was actually one of the guys that fought him, or if it was just like his posse, but still, a fight broke out. But this getting him started on his comeback, which was also not very recommended. Apparently he's had a heart attack, he's had other health issues, he's no spring chicken, he's in his late 40s. So it was very recommended that he doesn't get into the wrestling world, but he didn't care. He wanted to redeem himself. He wanted to show everybody that he did take wrestling seriously, that it wasn't a joke to him, and that he really cared. Which again gives me a little bit more respect to him, because many celebrities have come into the wrestling world for a minute and had an attitude of who cares because you're all a bunch of idiots. And it makes me feel good that not only did this celebrity care, but cared to a point that he was like, I'm not going to let this stand. I'm going to show you guys that I love wrestling, I care about wrestling, and I respect wrestling. So kudos to you, David Arquette. And he did take it seriously. Got trained, built a ring in his backyard. Went to a backyard wrestling event, and this is going to sound bad because I've talked about it before. I did backyard wrestling when I was a kid, but here's the thing. I look back on the stuff we did as a kid, and I cringe. Like, what an idiot I was. We all could have seriously gotten really hurt. And I'm not knocking backyard wrestling as a whole. To an extent, I understand, like, we love this, we're going to do it, but he went to a backyard wrestling event and participated and got the living crap beat out of him to gain a little respect. That's not going to gain you respect because, well, it's backyard wrestling. But after the backyard wrestling event, he starts getting more trained. He gets to the point where he's good enough to start getting into the independents and has his first feud with RJ City, and they tour around doing the feud, and he loses most of those fights, which, you know, kind of what you do when you're brand new. But ultimately was gaining enough respect and wasn't demanding anything ridiculous. Like, he wasn't trying to get any of these places to give him a belt or anything like that. He just wanted to show that I did take this seriously. I did respect wrestling. I love wrestling. I just want to be a part of this world. So basically, he's the Little Mermaid of wrestling. And from there, he was having a great run until he did a death match that resulted in him getting his neck cut in an artery that could have killed him. One of the reasons I'm not that big on death matches. Don't get me wrong, they're fun to watch, you know, the brutality and stuff, but as a fan who's seen this stuff, sometimes I'm like, God, you guys go really too far with this stuff. Because as much as I like a good hardcore match just like anybody else, I like a little blood and a little brutality, I don't want to see anybody die. But respect for him, because like a true wrestler, when he realized he was cut to the point that this is serious, was about to leave, decided, never mind, let's go back in and finish this real quick, which he did. Went and finished it, took the pin, then went to the hospital, and they stitched him up, and spoilers, he's alive. But it was a really weird moment when he was on his way to the hospital and the cameras were panning around, and I'm watching going, does that look Perry? But from there, that wasn't enough. He was not done. He was still going to go. And then oddly enough, soon after he had his near-death experience, a few months later, Luke Perry passed away. We all remember that. It was very sad. And apparently when I was watching and went, was that Luke Perry? It was indeed Luke Perry. Apparently Luke Perry was an avid wrestling fan like David Arquette. Not to his extent, but like David Arquette. And apparently him and David Arquette were really good friends. I gotta wonder if they became friends on the set of Buffy. And it was really sad for David Arquette to lose such a good friend. But he continued to go until everything came full circle, and at that next year's Legends of Wrestling event, they actually let him not only be on the card, but main event it against Mr. Anderson. And then that wasn't even the end. It went on a little bit more to show, like, the relationship of David Arquette and Jack Perry, who was, at the time of his father's death, just getting started in wrestling finally. And David Arquette and him having a match, and him giving him his blessing and everything. And as we know, Jack Perry, Jungle Boy, has been doing very well for himself in AEW, tagging with Luchasaurus and Marco Stunt. So all in all, this documentary, You Cannot Kill David Arquette, was a really good documentary. I highly recommend you guys check it out. For those of you who were angry at David Arquette, check it out. I guarantee you'll be less angry at David Arquette. To those of you who are like me and we're never angry at David Arquette, you'll respect him even more. And ultimately, as a wrestling fan, it's just a feel-good story. It's kind of a place that I think all wrestling fans secretly want to be in. We want that moment of just being in a ring and wrestling, and even though we accept that most of us can't do it. I accepted that after doing one day of actual wrestling training. Believe it or not, those ropes really hurt. So there you have it. That's my review of You Cannot Kill David Arquette. Great documentary that I recommend you guys check out. Hope you guys enjoyed this review, and if you did, make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, hit that little bell so you get notifications for when I post new videos, and leave a comment. Tell me what you thought of the documentary You Cannot Kill David Arquette. Love you guys.